all you wonderful viewers out there in Viewerland. It's Kerbal Space Program Fundamentals again, and today we're going to be handling some space stations. Space stations present us with some unique opportunities to have a long-term home away from home out in space. We can use them for refueling platforms. We can use them for science gathering platforms. We can put labs in orbit around the moon or Dunna or something to increase the amount of science we get from experiments performed in these remote locations and transmitted home. They're pretty darn handy, and they're a lot of fun. They're one place in Kerbal where you really have an opportunity to let your imagination kind of go nuts. We don't need to worry about like the total weight of a space station once we've gotten in orbit or something, so you can build these monstrous, crazy things and really make them look cool. Only limits are your imagination. Another thing that's really nice about space stations, they teach you a lot about multi-part spacecraft and kind of the fundamentals of how those work. So if we're going to use some kind of a multi-part spacecraft to go to, I don't know, Dunna, then we're going to need to start with a space station and develop those fundamentals. So first things first, we need a sort of core component of our space station. A simple module that doesn't weigh drastically a different amount from the other modules we plan to launch, that will be able to hold some dudes that will allow other things to attach to it and act as kind of a starting point for us. So, to that end, I'm going to grab this remote guidance pack here, just a big probe body. Move that up here. And then we're going to start attaching some components to that. I like these cupola modules. I like to include one of those on all my space stations. I also like to put a hitchhiker on. So I'm going to put a hitchhiker and a cupola. Now their ladders are connected. They can move around between those two. Just to keep it simple, I'm going to grab... Oh, wrong section. I'm going to grab this adapter here, flip that over, and let's see, how about a structural fuselage and a docking port over here in utility. Now, we haven't really messed with docking ports yet. We haven't had to dock anything to anything else. Docking is very simple. You just need to rub docking ports together until the two components realize that they love each other very much and they want to spend their lives together. It's actually even easier than that. You line the two docking ports up, you move them into each other, they're going to connect. Your two craft become one craft. There's a little more to it once you actually start trying to execute on that, but we'll cover that. No need to worry. Basically, we just want to have that docking port out somewhere kind of away from the rest of this craft, because we don't want to build something that's too squished up together. We don't want to have any collisions. The only thing we want touching is that docking port. So for right now, we're just going to keep things kind of separate, spread apart, and safe. So this is what we're launching, ostensibly, right? But it needs some more components to become functional. So some of the stuff we're already kind of familiar with from the other videos would be like electricity. We got to have some electricity up there. So how are we going to do that? We're going to need to store the electricity. We can go ahead and just grab one of these rechargeable battery packs. I'll just put it right here. No problem. Boom. We got more battery power now. Since this is going to have a little bit of battery power. This is going to have a little bit of battery power. This has much more though. So that's going to see us through the dark side of Kerbin if we're needing to do anything that expends electricity while we're orbiting around the back side of the planet away from the sun. We're going to need to recharge those battery packs. So we can either get some deployable solar panels, or for this component we could just put these flat ones. But let's use this the 1x6. I like those. I'm going to set myself to 4 times symmetry. I'll put those right there. That looked pretty good, I think. So we've got these solar panels. We want to be able to extend them very easily. Otherwise, you end up clicking and you're right-clicking and say, okay, extend. That's tedious. So we're going to go over here to the action groups. Let's select number 9. And then we'll just pick our solar panels. You see, we put them in together, so they all select together when I click on them. And then we'll say toggle panels. So now once I have this thing out in orbit, I can hit the 9 key. They'll open up. Say I attach another component that's going to do all the power gathering for this station. I don't need those solar panels anymore. I can hit 9 and fold them back up. Very easy. So that's a nice hassle-free thing. Also really good to be able to contract your solar panels when you're doing some kind of a docking operation. They're really easy to snap off. Of all the things you can damage, I can bump these structural components pretty hard and nothing will happen to them. But boy, if I look at that solar panel wrong, it'll break right off. So that's a nice little safety feature there, being able to retract those quickly. So okay, we got electricity. Now we need maneuverability. So in order to give ourselves that maneuverability, we're going to add first a second reaction wheel. We've got one up here in the cupola, Francis Ford cupola. I'm going to put one down here at the bottom, and that's going to act like, come here, docking port, get on there. That's going to act like a sort of two hands holding the opposite ends of a lever. I can manipulate that lever very easily like that, rather than trying to twist it just from one end. So having one right at the middle is also really good. We don't need one. This craft is fairly small, so just one at each end should be fine. Sorry, that thing's not going to spin out of control. We can control its sort of attitude and which way we want to point it, how we want it to angle itself, but we can't move it around relative to another craft. To do that, we're going to need some of these little RCS ports, the thruster blocks, and we're going to need some RCS fuel, which we get down here. Well, also this giant monster, but if you ever need this much RCS fuel, you're doing something really cool. These will be fine for right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little button down here at the bottom left that says Center of Mass. That gives me this little guy right here, which shows me where the center of this thing is according to weight. If I were to tip this thing on its side, I could balance it right about here, and this half would weigh as much as all of this half. I guess this thing's very heavy with all that glass in there, a lot of metal. So now that I know where the center is roughly, that can help me make some decisions on where to place my RCS fuel. That's going to cause the weight to shift around about. And it also tells me where I want to put my thruster ports and blocks in order to manipulate this thing without it kind of flipping end over end or being really difficult to handle. So going back over here, I'm going to get 2x symmetry and grab a couple of these cylindrified tanks. I'm just going to put them right here. I think that looks pretty good. Boom. And you see the center of mass dropped a little bit. Now I'm going to get my RCS thruster blocks. I'm going to go to 4x symmetry, and I'm going to put them actually just about here and about, let's see, here. So that ought to give me some distance away from this central point. As I use RCS fuel, this will continue to drift around, but I think that's pretty good placement. We also don't have to be super precise here because we've got a reaction wheel here and a reaction wheel up here. So if I apply force going in this direction, going off to the right here, and I'm applying a little too much force down here, maybe not quite enough up here, for example, and the craft starts to twist, these reaction wheels are going to do everything they can to hold it straight. We've got plenty of electricity. We've got more electricity gathering devices, so that shouldn't be a problem for us. And that'll give us a nice, stable controlling craft. That should work pretty well. If we were doing something very precise and the RCS had to just be perfect, we might be a little more delicate about where we place these things. I might not even use these ports because this thing is going up first and other things are going to dock to it. So I might never even need to use these. I'm being a little hasty on where I'm placing them, but it should be fine. I don't foresee a problem. This thing is probably good to go. So we need a lifter. We need something to get it up into orbit and get it around where we want it to be. So I'm just going to grab a decoupler, and then I'm going to put a very small rocket underneath it. So just this little guy here, the little liquid fuel engine. Like you guys probably remember from our trip to the moon and when we did orbital operations, we don't need a lot of fuel, we don't need a lot of power in order to do a lot of work in orbit and move a lot of stuff around in orbit. Things like weight, this is not got that much to it. This is hollow, this is hollow, this is hollow, this is heavy as all crap, but in the grand scheme of things, this is not a very heavy craft. Not much weight to move around. So this little guy shouldn't have too much trouble pushing it around. I say that now, we'll get out there and it'll be terrible and look stupid. Whatever. I didn't claim to be an expert. Okay. Now I'm going to flip these little separatrons over, right? I picked these separatrons up from right here in the engines section, the propulsion section, and I've turned them upside down. That looks crazy, but it makes sense. So this will be the final piece of our rocket that's going to be attached to our space station. When we get our space station to its destination out there in orbit, we don't want to just decouple this rocket, because then it's just going to be floating around out there. And it might bump into the space station. It might break off a solar panel. It might be getting in the way when we're trying to dock other components into place. We're going to have to launch other missions and build baskets to grab this dumb thing and try to deorbit it. What we're going to do here is we're going to take these separatrons and we're going to put them in the same stage as this decoupler. So now what's going to happen, we're going to use this, and when we're done with it, we can just point the cupola here into the prograde vector, so it's pointing in the direction of our travel, and fire this decoupler. It's going to activate all of these engines, and they're going to push this bad boy far away from our space station. It should slow it down enough that it'll take it out of orbit and kind of prevent some space junk from accumulating in orbit or anywhere near our space station. So this is going to be good for us. We're happy about this. This is environmentally friendly for space. Okay, I'm going to lift this up a little bit so we have some more room down here. We don't have to worry about running to the floor. Now we'll need another decoupler, another stack decoupler right there, and then we'll just keep this simple. I'll build this, like I've built this same lifter like a million times, but it works. It'll get a medium-sized load up into space without too much trouble. I'm just using this skipper engine because I actually don't need the lifting power of the main sail, which is really very, very powerful. The skipper's a little more delicate and might actually do a kind of a better job of not kicking the crap out of this thing on launch. So I'm going to go to 6 times symmetry. I'm going to grab some of these radial decouplers, throw those guys on there. We'll get some of these long fuel tanks. Love the long fuel tanks. I like keeping my part count low, so larger fuel tanks, they help with that a lot. Just put a few of those together. And we don't need gimbaled engines, so I'm going to grab the T-30s. Our central engine is gimbaled, and it's going to be burning the whole time, so it'll provide our guidance. These guys are just kicking the thing upwards. Of course, I'm going to put nose cones on it, because that's what I like. And we're going to get some fuel line. It's getting close. And we'll just attach that fuel line on right there. Grab our central engine right here in the stack, move it down to ignite with the rest of them, so all of our engines fire at once. These external tanks will feed the internal tank. That'll push the rest of this thing up. They'll drop away. We'll have our central stack, or our central engine just going, which would leave this little guy to push us around in orbit, and then we'll get this thing up there. Now we need a name for this. What could we call it? Yeah, Fundamentals Station. I don't want to be Fundamentalist Station. That'd be bad. Oh gosh. Okay. This whole thing is probably rigid enough the way it is. If you build something like this and you get a little top heavy and you start to wobble, you could put some struts across here, something to just kind of firm the whole thing up. I'm going to try to launch it like this and we'll see how it works. I think it'll be alright. Now we're going to go over here to our crew. Let's see, we've got a guy here in the cupola. We're going to pull him out. We don't need a crew for this. We've got this probe to run the whole operation. We don't want to put a guy up there before there's any way to get back down. We've got our solar panels set. We've got our RCS. Everything looks good. Let's launch the fundamentals station. Here we go. Who's excited? Raise your hand. My hand's up. That's a noise. I don't know why it's making that noise. Okay, cool. We're here. One awful noise later, we're here. Crank up the throttle. I think you guys generally know how launches go by this point, right? If you've seen any of the other videos. We go up for a little while. We turn right. You know. It's pretty simple stuff. Boy, that's loud. I hate to interrupt a video to do something like this, but geez Louise. Oh, it's at 2%. Are you kidding me? 1% maybe. That's better. Like, yeah, squad, I get it. Rockets are loud. Jeez. Do you have to try to blow my eardrums out? And we're going up. So, like I said, space stations kind of came after the moon missions. We had Apollo. We launched all of these rockets up to the moon, and we explored. We brought back moon rocks. We kicked the Soviets' butts, right? All those important things that we needed to do up there. But once we'd been up there a few times, we started to ask questions like, why? Why are we going to the moon? What's up there? What are we bringing back? How much is this costing? You know, we're in the middle of like cultural revolution here in the States and unpopular wars, and Nixon was in charge, and the moon missions were definitely seen as like a Kennedy thing. So he's spending all this money to keep making the guy who came before him look good, basically. So Nixon was never very fond of those moon missions. So put the kibosh on that. We're not going to the moon anymore. Forget all this moon stuff. What are we going to do with this leftover Apollo hardware? NASA, oh no. Oh no. We're top heavy. Okay. Let's roll with it. Let's see if we can do it. We can complete a loop. We're going to complete a loop. This is not planned. Come on. Let's use the RCS. Lift it up. Get the nose up. Oh my god. This might not make it, but that was fun, right? Who had fun? I had fun. Am I the only one raising my hand again? So I'm using my RCS. I actually turned the RCS on just now during the launch to try to control that. I guess we are a little top heavy here, having that cupola way out front like that, but it's too late now. We're already launching. It's like I'm going to have to micromanage this one. So anyhow, Nixon, yeah, not a big fan of the Apollo missions and stuff. I mean, I'm sure he was excited about it as a, you know, a human being living on Earth during those missions, but I could see how he'd be less than enthusiastic about spending so much money for the project. Revert flight, that's no good. Try again. Let's go back here. I'm just going to put some struts and see if that helps. I haven't used many struts in this series so far. I've been trying to keep these craft very simple, very stable, very easy to fly. But the more complicated you get, the more you will come to love and trust in struts. They are real important. Now that should take some of the wobble out. We're still really top heavy. This thing might tip over again. I'm going to try to be a little more gentle as we rise and turn. Let's see what happens. Do. It's making that noise again. Love that noise. Okay. And lift off. So, Nixon says no more of these moon landings. NASA, they've got what they... We've got a Kerbal in here. All right, yeah, you're going up. I'm not restarting this. Okay, NASA, having some resources left over. They've got some Apollo or some Saturn V rockets that are already pretty much ready to go. What else can they do with them? So, I believe it was Werner von Braun came up with the idea of using the spent fuel stages as space station components, right? We're already lifting this thing into space. It contains a vast amount of nothing on the inside of it now. Why not put some dudes in there? Let them run around. Let them do some science inside these expended fuel stages of a rocket, a large rocket like Saturn V. I think eventually they moved away from that and went towards a purpose-built space station that kind of matched the dimensions of that fuel section. So, if I'm not mistaken, it was the translunar injection phase of the rocket that was eventually used as Skylab. So, Skylab was the first American space station. We launched that on a Saturn V rocket, put it up into orbit. The launch didn't go great, though. Kind of like these aren't going super fantastic, but it wasn't NASA's fault like this is my fault. What they had going on was micrometeorites. So micrometeorites coming into contact with the space station as it's on its way up to orbit caused it to lose some heat shielding and damage their solar panels. So some of the solar panels wouldn't deploy automatically, meaning the station is basically crippled and can't power some of its systems that would be necessary for astronauts to be up there and work and get anything done. And it's also going to become incredibly hot. Space is a very cold place, right? We think about space, the icy depths of space, but if you heat something up here on Earth, the way it gets cold again is it's surrounded by room temperature air, right? It's like 72 degrees somewhere, and you've got a 200-degree piece of metal. That piece of metal is going to make the air around it hot, and in that way it is radiating its heat out into the environment and cooling itself off. It's only got so much energy in it. In space, you're in a near vacuum. So with that, besides like, radiation or something like that, heat doesn't really go anywhere. So if you get something very hot in space, it just stays hot. So how are you going to radiate this heat away? Well, now we have, like the Apollo astronauts had their coolant system that was venting water out into space as vapor to carry away their body heat, things like that. Part of the solution for Skylab was to shield it from the sun's radiation so that it would not get very hot. Well, that shielding is now gone, damaged in the launch. So how are you going to keep it from heating up? So the first mission out to Skylab was actually a big repair mission. Had to get some astronauts out there. They had to do some spacewalk maneuvers, get out, manually deploy the solar panels, right? So get out there and attach a tool and crank these things out, get them into position. And they also had to do something about the heat. And what I think is kind of neat, if you look at the pictures, it looks like they just used like a thermal blanket. Like one of those blankets you would use if you were surviving after, some horrible event left you stranded out in the woods or something and you needed to keep your body heat in or whatever. The shiny reflective emergency blankets that you see in like a roadside kit. Just using one of those basically to reflect the heat away from the spacecraft. All right, you see I'm going way up here. I'm going to take this to about 140. I built another space station that's sitting here at 100, so we can look at that later. It's just sort of an example of where we can go with this, but I'm going to take our station way out to 140. It's going to be a bit higher up. There's a few advantages to that. Whenever you're rendezvousing with something, if you need to catch up with it, you should be at a lower altitude. If you need to let it catch up to you, you need to be at a higher altitude. Well, how am I supposed to get at a lower altitude and catch up with something if it's right at 70? Right? It's going to make it difficult for me. Also, I can only time accelerate so much when I'm at these lower altitudes, right? So if we're at 70 to 120, we can only do the up to the fourth notch here, which what is like 50 times 50? I forget. If we go above 120, we get that fifth notch, so we can speed time up quite a bit more, makes rendezvous much easier. I recommend building stations a little bit further out, unless you have a reason for building them low, like you're wanting to launch something from it and take advantage of the Oberth effect or whatever. So we're just coasting up now. We're well out of the atmosphere. We can go ahead and deploy our solar panels. Just get those out, keep the batteries topped up, even though we're at no risk of running out. It's going to be a nice looking little space station there. Let's get up to our apoapsis. get this bad boy pointed in the right direction. And we're going to want to make sure we get rid of this orange tank before we circularize. We don't want it floating around with us. In fact, we're going to drop it before we get a periapsis on the other side. Whoop. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. And now we're just going to get this up near our 142. Kind of a sloppy approach on my circularization here, but we can clean that up over a couple of orbits. In fact, I'm going to run that down to 140. And then I'm just going to wait until we come back to this point, and I'm going to finish that part of the orbit. So there's our space station. Zooming around. Want a nice predictable orbit. It's going to make it a little easier to do some of our rendezvous maneuvers if we don't have some crazy inclined orbit. If you have a reason to make your space station inclined, you're going to have a harder time rendezvousing with it, getting crew up and down from it. It's just a little more difficult, but it will look really cool, and you can brag about it on the Reddit or on the forums or something. So I don't know how much that matters to you. Bring this up to 140. Oh no, you're drifting away. Come back, come back. There we go, 140 and 141. I can live with that. Alright, so we're right here on our prograde, and we're just going to fire this decoupler. And it's gone. So that's super easy. I really like that. That raised our apoapsis a little bit, so I'm going to turn our RCS motors on. And I'm going to hit the N key, which is going to burn in the opposite direction. You see, this does not use much monopropellant. We have plenty. I'm just going to lower that down, back down to that 140 mark. There, I get 140, 140. Nice circular orbit. So you don't need that much power when you have a light load and you're already out in orbit. Put this pointing straight north. I'm going to rotate it this way. Just look nice. There we go. Pretty cool. There's our little space station, right? We got our little outpost out here in orbit. We've got, who is this? Genbulls Kerman. EVA him. I'm going to let him hang out in the larger little little hitchhiker can there, so he doesn't have to live in that cramped little cupola. Let's go get... Oh, wait, we need to rename the craft. Rename vessel. It is a station. Okay, boom. Now let's get something to attach to it. So we've only got one docking port on this, so I think where I'm going to go and be creative, do what you want to do, I'm going to design something that's going to provide some more electricity and some more docking ports to our little station. So, and we spent a little time making this lifter, and it worked really great aside from the whole top-heavy part, but that's not its fault. So we're going to save this. This is a subassembly. So we can go right over here to the subassembly button. You can see I've already got a small lifter in here, but I'm going to grab another one. I'm going to grab right here at the very top of the component that I want to detach, right? So that's that whole lifter there. And I just bring it to the subassembly drop zone. It gives me this option. I'm going to say fundamentals lifter. Save it. And now a new craft. So we've saved our lifter in the subassembly. Let's get a little remote guidance unit. We're going to try to build this quickly so you guys don't have to sit here and watch me screw around the VAB. Throw a docking port on top. Maybe a structural component right here. And then, no, I'm going to put one of these. Yeah, that looks cool. And then another structural component. What is this? Get off of there. Another docking port. And then I'll just copy that, rotate it all the way around. It's this component, maybe they fixed it, but at least it didn't used to like symmetry mode very much. There we go. So now we can expand on our space station some more. And down here at the bottom, let's get... You know what? I'm kind of doing it again. I'm making something top heavy. Grab this, flip it, flip this. Ugh, should throw that one away. It's acting up. It's acting up, and I'm not going to tolerate it. There we go. Boom. And then on top, we're going to get some of these scaffolding pieces. Nice and light. That. How about another docking port right there so we can dock more stuff to it. And then we'll go 2 times symmetry and get one of these big solar panel arrays. Just slap that on there. I'm going to go back to my action groups. I'm going to set this one to 10, which is the 0 key on my keyboard. Set that to toggle those panels. Gonna need some power storage. Oops. Put that right here. Come here, battery. Oops. Thank you for bearing with me. I just clicked out of my game somehow. Stupid Windows key. Alright, throw those on there. Put that back into place. Check on my action groups to make sure they didn't get deleted. Nope, they're good. Alright, so that's a pretty good component. Now we just need to get that RCS so we can dock this thing onto the bottom of our space station. So let's get that center of mass visible. Let's go look for some fuel tanks. Put them... Let's see. If I put these right here, and then I can attach my SAS module, put one right there, which will kind of extend this. I can fit some thrusters on it, and 4 times symmetry. I put them right there. I don't want anything too close to the docking port that could bump or get in the way of it docking correctly. And then, let's see, that's about that far away. So I'll just put 4 more right here. Oh, that's weird. Flip them around a little bit. There we go. Boom. So that autopilot and handle fairly well. Shouldn't be too much trouble to get that to attach. We got solar panels, we got batteries. Beautiful. I can't wait to launch this. And I don't have to wait very long to launch it because I can just go to my sub-assemblies, grab our fundamentals lifter, slap her right on the bottom. All of our staging is intact, all of our fuel lines, everything is good to go. When you start doing asparagus staging, things like that, where it gets fiddly and you're screwing around with fuel lines all afternoon, it's really nice to be able to just save something in a sub-assembly and then launch it. Very handy. So if you keep your spacecraft components roughly similar sizes, similar weights, then you can just keep using the same launcher over and over and over again, save yourself a bunch of time. Now this is probably a little bit lighter than the last thing we launched, but shouldn't be a problem. Let's get this bad boy up there. So yeah, the original Skylab had its problems, had to be sort of helped to limp along there at the beginning of its existence. But it was a success, definitely a success. We learned a ton. We did a lot of amazing experiments. Richard Garriott, the guy that made like Ultima and a lot of other video games, kind of famous, Lord British. His father was actually one of the astronauts up there during those missions, Skylab missions. The Russians went a slightly different route. They had the most famous station they launched was the Mir. I think they had a station before that, but the name of it's not coming to mind. They had the Mir, and the station that existed for much longer than Skylab had a much more, let's say, ambitious mission plan, and really a lot of amazing science, a lot of amazing accomplishments. Talking about astronauts or cosmonauts spending more than a year, I believe, on board. So I think they had the record is something like 400 consecutive days in orbit, just sitting there on Mir. Not without its faults. Several accidents, fires taking place on Mir, pieces of equipment failing, and they added so many components to it. I mean, by the time Mir was deorbited and sort of decommissioned, it really looked bizarre. I mean, pieces coming out at every angle, all of these solar panels and components, just really a lot of kind of aftermarket stuff, things that weren't necessarily initially intended for this spacecraft. But they managed to accomplish so much with it. It's really amazing. Really a testament to the team that assembled that station and did all that work. So, okay, there's our station. It's ahead of us. So we're going to come at a fairly low orbital altitude to catch up to it, and then we're going to rise up to meet it, match its speed, and then dock. Should be super easy. Another thing you can do to kind of speed this process up for yourself is before you launch, you can time accelerate as much as you want. So you could time accelerate, bring your station around to maybe somewhere around here, and then launch and catch up with it and meet it during your initial gaining of altitude. If you're still a little shaky on getting into orbit, some of your orbits are kind of ugly when you first put them up and you got to refine them, I wouldn't recommend doing that because you're going to give yourself very little time to make those adjustments. So launch whenever, get yourself into a nice tidy orbit, and then catch up to or be caught up with. Sort of the way to go. Ooh, we are gaining altitude fast. Put the nose down on this thing so we can stretch this orbit out. Be as efficient as possible, even though we have so much fuel left. I'm going to go ahead and set this as my target. So we'll start to see we've got quite a different orbital inclination. I'll have to make that adjustment. That's plenty high. Let's get up to that apoapsis. Start coasting. It looks pretty cool. Alright. There we go. Pretty close to my apoapsis. I'm going to go ahead and start burning. And again, we've still got a really large rocket component attached, so we don't want to totally get orbit just yet. We just want to get close, and then we can dump that big fuel tank. Okay, got a periapsis, but it's still low enough. So I'm going to ditch this thing and start burning. This will go up slower since we've got less thrust now, but we're definitely not in any risk of deorbiting, damaging our spacecraft. Much more maneuverable now. Okay, 79, 76, it's fine. We're not staying in this orbit for very long. We're just using this to catch up. Here's our little spacecraft. Go ahead and deploy our solar panels. Get kind of a preview of what this thing's going to look like. Oh, very cool. It's going to look great. Alright, so we've got a descending node, 0.7 degrees. So I'm going to get right on that node, select it, and since it's descending, I'm going to pull the sort of upwards direction here on this little triangle. See, now it's down to 0.6. Apply a little more thrust, 0.5. Now it's at 0. I'll give it just a little more. Okay, so now we should have a node. Let's go ahead and flip around until we find it. Oh, went the wrong way. I always do. There's our node. And we'll fast forward. Coming up on our burn point here. Give it the gas. Watching our delta V requirement tick down. Gave it a little extra, so I'm going to use that RCS trick and hit the N key again. See that getting low. Boom. So now we're at 0.0. So we have a nice orbit. We are on the same orbital plane as the thing we wish to rendezvous with, and we're catching it up very quickly. So if I speed up time here, you should be able to see how we are closing that gap between ourselves and our station. So what we don't want to do is go too far, which we may have done. We don't want to go too far where we end up passing it. So before that happens, I'm going to start messing with maneuver nodes. And this is a lot of these kind of maneuvers, whether you're rendezvousing or transferring to another planet or something, playing with these maneuver nodes and getting an idea of what to expect. So here we've got a separation of 285 kilometers. Well, what if we move it a little further down? Let's get closer. 198, looks like it's a lot closer. So let's see how far along we need to go. 2.7. Is that a little too far? 3.4. You know, and this doesn't cost you anything, no power, no fuel. You're just experimenting and perfect that encounter. Spending a little more time here is going to make your encounter all the easier. 1.8. That's close enough. That's plenty close for our initial encounter, and then we can clean it up a little bit when we get there. Alright, let's find that node again. Looking for a node. Ought to be somewhere around here. There it is. Right on our retrograde marker. We'll just line up with that. It's going to drift a little bit, just get pointed in generally the right direction. We can start fast forwarding time. You can see that node drifting away from us a little bit. 10 minutes, 9 minutes. And look, 10-second burn. We have so much fuel left. We should have plenty of gas to get to it, match speed, and handle all of our docking maneuvers. Okay. So line right up on that node. And just got another couple of seconds to go through here. Matching our orbits up. Getting that encounter. Okay. Now we can mess with it a little bit. So if we get right on our prograde marker, turn that RCS back on, and I want to look at this intersect 1 separation, 1.8. So what if I give it a little more gas? That goes up. What if I give it a little reverse? That goes back up. Okay, so that's a good encounter. We're not going to get that really any closer from where we're at without getting into a bunch of crazy stuff. So we're just going to let ourselves catch up with it over there. So let's fast forward again. This is also nice because we're meeting it up on the morning side, so we should have this entire portion of our orbit to dock, and we don't have to worry about turning the lights on the station or anything. Daytime is always easier, whether you're landing on the moon or docking with a space station. So now we've switched to target. We want to get on the retrograde marker. So we want to burn away from, or we want to match the speed of our station here as it's zipping by us. It's going to just carry on, so we're going to speed up and catch it. We want to take that target speed to 0. And if you want more details on the rendezvous stuff, that I have a video of it. I think it's the part 2 video is all about just matching speed, getting close up. We don't dock in that, but we do very detailed, very close-in rendezvous. So now we've matched our speed. I'm going to just point my craft at my target, and you can see down here there's a little icon, that sort of broken circle with a dot in the middle. That represents the direction of our target. And I'm going to try to bring this marker right on top of it. There we go. Let's look at the map. Now we've got a 1.6 over here. I'm going to give it a little more gas and see if we can shrink that down. 1.5. Okay, 0.3. That's really weird the way it's flickering like that, but Should be fine. So we're going to be coming really close to this thing. We don't want to break our solar panels. We don't want to damage anything. So I've got plenty of electricity right now. I'm going to fold my panels up. I'm going to get myself pointed away from it so I'm ready to apply the brakes. And I'm just going to speed up time until I get a little closer to this point where we're going to be 0.3 kilometers from a collision. So there we are. We're probably at our closest right now. So I'll apply those brakes, getting this down to 0 again. We don't want to overcompensate and start flying away from it. Okay. Hello, cat. You want to be on the internet? Meow. It's my cat, everybody. Say hi. It's Sophie. Hey, Sophie. Okay. Now we're going to get this approach again. Giving a little extra speed so we get there quicker. I don't want to come up on this thing in the dark. And immediately going to start turning because we're already close and we're basically on a collision course. We don't want to just crash into this thing. Even if Dave Matthews tells us to. Okay. Getting closer. We can start to see the details there. See our little space station. Okay. That's close enough for me. I'm going to slow it down. So now we just need to ditch our rocket, and we can do the rest of this with RCS. And we're going to use a different control mode and a different camera mode. So let's get ourselves back to orbital view. Point into prograde. And I'm going to go ahead and quick save just in case something goes terribly wrong. Boom! Launch that thing. Now you see we're drifting away. We need to use our RCS to slow it down. Those decouplers have some force that they apply. Then remember that. We should be fine. So just go back to our target. Now we're coming back up on it. Just gonna let it catch up again. Whenever you're doing these kind of operations, you don't want to break anything, so fast forwarding time is often a better option than just speeding yourself up. Whenever you're getting faster, you're potentially causing problems. Okay, so now we're going to go over here to these little controls, and we're going to select the docking controls. Some people really like them, some people don't like the docking controls. I happen to like them. Mess around with them. If you don't care for them, you don't have to use them. We're also going to go into our spacecraft. We're going to decide which one of these nodes we want to attach. I want to attach this one. So I'm going to right-click on it and click Control from here. Now, my nav ball information is counting this port as the front of my craft. So that's going to be really important when you're moving around a weird piece like this that has a lot of ports, or you're moving something essentially backwards like we're doing right now. I'm going to go to our target. I'm going to select the docking port and say set as target. So it's specifically pointing me at that port. And then I'm going to hit the V key, which is going to change my view. And keep hitting it until I get chase. Chase view is going to move the camera relative to the spacecraft. So if I put it directly behind like this, it will, when I rotate the craft, rotate the camera. This is really handy when you're doing these kind of docking maneuvers. In this docking control mode, we're going to use WASD, QE, Shift and Control, and the space bar, right? Lots of buttons, lots of fun buttons. So by hitting space bar, we're moving from, rotational to linear. So right now we're in linear. If I press left, I press the A key, we move left. Right, we move right. If I press W, we move forward. S, we move back. Right, pretty simple. Q and E will rotate us. That won't change. That'll be kind of universal no matter what you're doing. Q and E will rotate the craft. Line it back up the way I wanted it. There we go. Now if we hit the space bar, we go into rotational. Now W and S cause me to rotate that way. forward and back. And my left and right will move me left and right. So we're going to go back to linear. Oh, the one I didn't cover in linear. Shift goes up, control goes down. There we go. That should be all the controls. So we're going to go down a little bit. We want to approach this thing from the bottom. And if we're using this little target guy here and matching speed and keeping our speed, this relative speed, very low, we should have all the time in the world to do these docking maneuvers. We shouldn't have to hurry. We shouldn't have to panic and do anything at super high speed, which is how you make mistakes and how problems happen. So keep that speed low. This thing's not going anywhere. If it takes you 2 orbits to do your docking, that's better than having to do a whole nother launch because you smashed your spaceship. Okay, we're coming in nice and slow. We've still got plenty of monopropellant, plenty of electricity, nothing to worry about, moving nice and slow. So what we're going to do now is rotate by hitting the space bar, point upwards as we're docking, with that bottom port there. Kind of get oriented. See, that should look good. And this will all take practice. First docking takes for flippin' ever because a lot of this is sort of counterintuitive to the way humans think about motion and traveling and covering distances. Like, it just doesn't make sense because you're not thinking about, well, these things aren't sitting still. They're just both moving at incredible speeds, but they happen to be moving at nearly the same incredible speed, and relative motion, things like that don't really come into it. Okay, so back down here, we're going to get lined up where our direction of travel is equal or right lined up with that marker we were looking at earlier, and we want to get our prograde marker right on there as well. And mess around with your controls, and you'll see that you can manipulate that pretty easily. The other thing you might need to do is hit the caps lock key, which will greatly reduce the amount of thrust you're getting from your RCS. So you can do some finer, detailed maneuvers. So like right now, I'm going to try to get myself oriented along the same sort of line that my target is oriented on. I think that's pretty good. And I'm going to rotate myself just a little bit because I like things to line up. Okay. Now since this camera, it doesn't lock me to this back view, I can rotate, but it'll keep moving relative to my spacecraft, so I can get myself lined up like this. I can see along this axis and make sure I've got a good approach here. That looks pretty good. Now I can check this other axis. Whoa, way off. Apply a little thrust. And these docking ports are magnetized. So they want to come together. You really just need to get them kind of close, and they'll start to. You can actually see this spacecraft is being pulled in now. Oops! Get in there. Get in there. I've done this a bunch of times, and even I need to fiddle with it occasionally. Okay, there we go. So now we're docked. We've got a space station, a multi-part space station. Let's fold away our little dinky solar panels, deploy our big bad guy solar panels. Let's point them at the sun. There we go. So now we're gathering electricity. We have greater room for expansion. This thing could become a sprawling city in space, right? It's fantastic. Everybody's happy. I know I'm happy. So let's return to the Space Center, and I'll just give you a quick look at the station I made, and then this video is probably getting a little long, so we can just call it right there. Some of the things you'll have to do now that you have a space station, you'll probably want to design some sort of a very reliable crew craft, something that can send 3 or 5 or however many guys at once up there to replace the crew and cycle the crew out. You might want to create some purpose-built modules. So, for example, here, I've built a fairly similar craft. This is my initial component. Let's rotate this thing a little bit so we can see it a bit better. We got a bunch of reaction wheels on here so we can rotate it pretty easily. There we go. Okay, so yeah, we've got that initial component. I went for a different design for my second piece. I made this just sort of long central spine. So this is a design I've used a lot in the past. I make these, they contain a lot of RCS fuel, so I could use them to refuel smaller little RCS powered spacecraft that maybe just get from station to station or are used in station assembly. I've got lots of ports to attach other things to, and I could just launch another one of these and attach it onto the back and extend the station that way. I could launch another one and attach it right here onto the side and extend it out that way, whatever I want to do. We got a nice big solar panel array down here, so if I was running a bunch of laboratories or whatever else that needed electricity, I'd have that. I built myself a nice big antenna on the bottom just because I thought it would look neat to have all those kind of open up, and no matter which direction I'm pointing, one of those should be pointing back at Kerbin, so that's nice. Just for aesthetics for me, you know. I got a lab up here, so if I were to perform any experiments, which I've included a few experiment modules on it, but anything I would happen to do up here, I can get more science from by, you know, improving it in the lab. And then right there we've got just a very simple little crew delivery craft, right? Carries 3 Kerbals, comes up here, it docks, transfer Kerbals across. It carries lots of extra fuel, so I could take all this fuel and dump it into a fuel tank I kept up here if I wanted, and then use that to fuel other craft that were going out to the moon or to Minmus or, you know, whatever, going to some other station. It also carries extra RCS that I don't need, that I can use to refill these fuel tanks to top something else up. You can, you know, make a purpose-built large crew carrier or a purpose-built fuel delivery craft. Whatever you're into, you got a lot of flexibility when you're doing space stations, so I really love playing with these things. And I wish I had a larger one. With the new update and everything, I tend to restart my games, so I don't have a really big one to show off, but I do like building larger ones. So that about wraps it up for space stations. If you guys have any other questions about rendezvous, docking, space station building, let me know. I might not know the answer, but, you know, I'll go bug somebody on Reddit, or I'll experiment and figure it out. For the next mission, kind of debating what we might want to do. I could maybe start messing around in the space plane hangar. We could build a plane. We could build a space plane, do single stage to orbit space plane, something like that. Or maybe we could start constructing a multi-component vehicle and try to go out to Dunna and put some guys on the dirt there and then bring them back. That's a much more ambitious thing. That'd probably be a multi-video kind of tutorial. So let me know what you're interested in. Let me know if there's anything else, like a third option you can think of that you really want to see. I hope this has given you some more tools. With this in your pocket, you guys should really be starting to be able to express yourselves creatively in Kerbal Space Program and make the kind of craft you want to make. So let me know how I can help you do more of that. Everybody have fun, happy flying, and enjoy yourselves.